The desert encounter. The sun burned like fire above the endless desert. Heat waves danced on the horizon, making the ground look like boiling water. Every stone, every grain of sand carried the heat of 1,000 flames. The desert was silent, but it was not empty. A human traveler walked alone across this deadly land. His name was Daniel, a man with strong shoulders and tired eyes. He carried a small pack of supplies, a water flask tied to his belt. Every step felt heavy, as if the desert wanted to swallow him whole. As Daniel walked further, something caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just a shadow, maybe a trick of the heat. But then, he saw it again, a small figure lying on the sand. His heart beat faster. No one survived long out here. If someone had collapsed, they were already close to death. Daniel rushed forward. His boots sank into the hot sand, and sweat rolled down his neck. When he reached the figure, he froze. It was not human. It was a woman, but her skin glowed faintly like silver dust. Her hair spread across the sand like shining threads. Her lips were dry, cracked, and her chest rose only slightly with weak breaths. For a moment, Daniel could not believe what he was seeing. He had heard of aliens, yes, but never this close, never like this. She looked fragile, yet strange symbols glowed faintly on her skin. Her eyes, half open, revealed a light too bright to belong to a dying body. Daniel knelt down. He touched her arm. It was burning hot, dry like stone. She turned her face slightly, and with trembling lips, she whispered something. The words were broken, but the fear in her voice was clear. She was afraid to die. Daniel felt a tightness in his chest. He pulled his flask quickly, opening it with shaking hands. Only a little water remained inside, his last supply for the journey. He hesitated, staring at the flask. If he gave it to her, he might not survive. If he kept it, she would surely die. Her hand, thin and trembling, reached up weakly and touched his wrist. Her glowing eyes met his, and for the first time, Daniel felt something strange. It was not just fear or pity. It was a connection, as if she was silently begging him not for water alone, but for hope. Without thinking more, Daniel lifted her head gently. He poured a few drops of water against her lips. Her throat moved slowly as she swallowed. The sound was so faint, but it gave him relief. Her eyes closed, but a single tear rolled down her glowing cheek. It shone in the sunlight like liquid crystal. Daniel whispered to himself, "You're going to be all right. I won't let you die here." But inside he was unsure. Would water even save her? She was not human. Maybe her body needed something else, something he did not know. The desert wind blew hard, lifting sand into the air. Daniel pulled his scarf around her, trying to shield her from the sun. Her body was trembling, her breathing shallow. Every second felt like she was slipping away. He looked around, but there was nothing. Only sand, heat, and silence. A heavy fear settled in his chest. If he stayed here, she would die. If he moved her, he risked killing her faster, but doing nothing was not an option. Daniel lifted her in his arms. She was so light, almost weightless, as if the desert had already taken most of her strength. Her head rested against his shoulder, her breath warm but weak. He took a deep breath and started walking. He did not know where to go, but he knew he had to keep moving. The sky above was endless blue. The sand below burned his boots. But Daniel kept his steps steady. With every step, he whispered softly, "Hold on, just hold on." The alien woman stirred slightly in his arms. Her lips moved again, whispering a word. It was not English, yet somehow Daniel understood. It was a word filled with fear and longing, a word that meant only one thing: life. Daniel felt his heart tremble. He tightened his grip, looking at the horizon. He didn't know how, but he promised himself one thing. He would not let her die in this cursed desert. And so, under the burning sun, with danger all around, a human man carried an alien woman in his arms, neither knowing that this meeting, born in the silence of the desert, would change both their lives forever. The silent plea. The desert stretched endlessly. The sun had already started its cruel descent, turning the sky orange and gold. Daniel's arms ached from carrying the alien woman, but he did not stop. Every step felt heavier, yet the weight in his heart was stronger than the weight in his arms. The woman's breath came shallow and weak. Her head rested against his chest, her glowing skin dim as though her light was fading. Daniel whispered softly, "You're safe. Now just hold on." But even as he spoke, he feared his words were empty at last. Daniel found a group of jagged rocks forming a small shade. He lowered her gently onto the ground, placing his pack beneath her head. For a moment, he just sat there, his chest heaving, sweat dripping from his face. The silence of the desert was broken only by her faint breathing. Then she stirred. Her lips trembled, opening slightly. No words came out, only a sound, dry and broken. Daniel leaned closer. "What is it? What do you need?" he asked, his voice urgent. Her hand lifted weakly, fingers shaking like fragile glass. She pointed to his flask. Daniel quickly pulled it out, unscrewed the cap, and held it near her lips. She tried to drink, but the water dripped down the side of her mouth. Her body shivered as if the liquid burned instead of healed. Daniel's heart sank. "Water isn't enough," he whispered to himself. He remembered the way her eyes glowed when she whispered that strange word in the desert. Life. Was she trying to tell him something more? Something he didn't understand? The alien woman's eyes fluttered open. They were strange, shimmering like silver under the fading sun. Her gaze met his, pleading, begging. Daniel felt the weight of that look, more powerful than any spoken word. It was a silent plea, a cry for help that reached his very soul. "I don't know what you need," Daniel admitted softly. "I want to help you, but I don't know how." His voice cracked with frustration. He hated this feeling of helplessness. The woman's trembling hand touched his chest. Her fingers rested near his heart. Her cracked lips moved again, whispering a broken sound. It was not English, yet Daniel somehow felt the meaning. She was asking not only for water, she needed something else, something rare. Daniel closed his eyes, remembering old survival stories told in dusty taverns by wandering merchants. They spoke of alien tribes whose bodies could not survive on water alone. Their lifeblood required nectar from hidden desert plants, a glowing liquid that kept their kind alive. Could this be what she needed? He looked at her again, her skin glowing faintly in patches, her breath growing slower. If he stayed here, she would not last the night. He clenched his fists, determination burning in his eyes. "I'll find it," he whispered. "I'll find what you need." But a voice inside him reminded him of the danger. The desert was vast, filled with deadly creatures that hunted after sunset. If he left her alone, what if something found her first? If he didn't leave, she might die right here in his arms. The woman's hand slipped away from his chest. Her arm fell limply to her side. Her eyes closed again, her breathing now barely a whisper. Daniel felt panic rise inside him. "No. Stay with me," he said, shaking her gently. "You're not dying here. Not while I'm here." Her lips moved once more, forming a word so soft it was almost lost in the wind. It was not English, but Daniel felt the meaning in his bones. "Hurry." The word struck him like lightning. She was telling him she could not wait much longer. He rose quickly, scanning the horizon. Far to the west, he saw a line of dark caves carved into a cliffside. If the old stories were true, the nectar plant grew in such places, hidden from the sun. Daniel knelt beside her one last time. He wrapped his scarf around her fragile body to shield her from the cold that would soon fall with the night. He pressed her hand softly, whispering, "I'll come back. Don't give up." Her eyes flickered open one last time, weak but shining with trust. She gave the smallest nod. It was not much, but it was enough. Daniel stood, his shadow stretching across the sand. He turned toward the caves, his heart pounding with fear and hope. The desert wind howled behind him. The alien woman lay weak and silent, her body trembling. Her plea echoed in his mind, silent, desperate. unforgettable, a plea that bound his fate to hers. And so, as the sky darkened and danger awakened in the desert, Daniel began his desperate run toward the caves, every step carrying not just his own survival, but the fragile hope of a dying alien woman who had placed her life in his hands. The nectar of life. The desert night was coming fast. The sun slipped lower, painting the horizon red and purple. Shadows stretched long, and the air cooled, but danger grew in every corner. Daniel ran toward the caves, his boots kicking up dust, his breath sharp and heavy. Behind him, far across the sand, the alien woman lay weak beneath the rocks. Every moment he spent away from her was a gamble. He felt the weight of her life pressing on his shoulders. Her silent plea echoed in his mind like a whisper carried by the wind. Hurry! Daniel's legs ached, but he did not slow. The caves rose ahead of him like black mouths opening in the cliffside. Dark, deep, and cold. They looked like the kind of place no man should enter alone, but he had no choice. If the stories were true, the nectar plant was hidden here, and if he failed to find it, she would not see the morning. As Daniel entered the first cave, a chill spread over his skin. The air smelled damp, heavy with dust and something sharp. The sound of dripping water echoed through the hollow stone. He lifted a small light from his pack, its weak glow pushing against the dark. The walls shimmered faintly with minerals reflecting his every step. Deeper inside, the silence grew heavier, but Daniel's ears caught something. Scratches, faint movements. He froze, his heart pounding. The desert was home to many creatures, some small, some deadly, and many claimed these caves as their homes. Slowly, he pushed forward, his knife in one hand, his light in the other. The path twisted like a snake, until finally the air changed. A sweet smell drifted through the darkness, unlike anything he had ever breathed before. It was faint, but alive. Daniel's eyes widened. This must be it, he whispered. At last he reached a chamber. In the center grew plants unlike any on earth, tall, with glowing stems and large, crystal-like flowers. The petals shimmered with soft blue light, and from their hearts dripped a thick, glowing liquid. The nectar. Daniel's chest filled with hope. He hurried forward, pulling a small jar from his pack. With careful hands he touched one flower. It shivered under his fingers, as if alive. Then a drop of nectar slid down into the jar, glowing brighter than the flame of his light, but just as he gathered more, a sound cut through the cave. A deep growl, low and threatening. Daniel turned sharply. From the shadows, two glowing eyes appeared, then another, then another. His throat tightened. The nectar was guarded. 3 creatures stepped into the glow of his light. Their bodies were long-scaled and sharp-clawed. They hissed, their teeth shining with venom. Daniel's hand gripped his knife tighter. Of course it wouldn't be easy, he muttered under his breath. One creature lunged. Daniel jumped aside, slashing with his blade. The steel cut across its side, and the creature screamed, the sound bouncing off the stone. Another attacked from the left, but Daniel rolled, his light crashing against the rocks. Darkness swallowed the cave, only the faint glow of nectar and the beast's eyes remaining. Daniel fought in the half-light, every strike desperate. His knife found one neck and the creature fell, its body twisting. But the other 2 circled him, hissing louder. His chest heaved, his arm ached. But he could not give up. Not when she was waiting. With one final shout, Daniel charged forward. He stabbed the second beast, driving it back into the rocks. The third hissed, but as Daniel swung, the jar of nectar slipped from his grip. It fell, spinning, glowing liquid splashing against the stone. No! Daniel cried, lunging to catch it. His hand closed around the jar just before it hit the ground, but the last creature struck, claws slashing across his arm. Pain burned through him, hot and sharp. Still, he held the jar close, protecting it with his own body. Summoning his last strength, Daniel stabbed upward. The blade sank deep into the creature's chest. It let out a final shriek before collapsing in the dark. Silence returned, broken only by Daniel's ragged breaths. He leaned against the wall, clutching his bleeding arm. But in his other hand he held the jar, glowing faintly with the nectar of life. A weak smile crossed his face. "She's going to live," he whispered. Without wasting another second, Daniel turned back toward the entrance. His legs shook, his vision blurred, but he kept moving. Every step was driven by the image of the alien woman's eyes, begging him not to let her go. As he stumbled out of the cave, the stars had filled the desert sky. The cold night wind cut across his skin, but he did not stop. He held the jar close, its light guiding him through the dark sands. Behind him, the caves fell silent once more. Ahead of him, far away under, the jagged rocks. The woman waited, her life hanging by a thread, and Daniel ran, his heart beating with one thought only. He had found the nectar of life. Now he had to bring it to her before death claimed her forever. The first drop. The desert night had turned cold. The stars shone bright above, sharp and countless. Daniel stumbled across the sand, clutching the glowing jar of nectar close to his chest. His arm throbbed from the creature's claws, blood seeping into his torn sleeve. But he did not stop. Each step carried the weight of a single promise. I will not let her die. Far ahead, under the jagged rocks, the alien woman lay, her body almost still, her breath weaker than before. The scarf Daniel had wrapped around her fluttered in the night wind. It looked as if the desert was already trying to claim her. Daniel's chest ached with fear. What if he was too late? What if the nectar came too slowly, or worse? What if it didn't work at all? He pushed the thoughts away, forcing his legs to move faster. His boots sank into the sand, his lungs burned, but he would not stop now. At last he reached her. He dropped to his knees beside her, setting the glowing jar carefully on the ground. The light from the nectar spilled across her face. Her skin, once shimmering faintly, now looked pale and cracked, her lips barely moved, whispering sounds too weak to understand. Daniel's heart pounded. He leaned close, whispering, "I'm here. I found it. Hold on." But her eyes stayed closed. Her chest rose so faintly that, for a moment, terror shot through him. Was he already too late? With shaking hands, Daniel opened the jar. The smell of the nectar filled the air, sweet and sharp, unlike anything he had ever known. It glowed softly, almost alive. He dipped his finger inside, lifted a single shining drop, and with trembling care he touched it to her lips. For a long heartbeat, nothing happened. Then her throat moved slightly, swallowing. Her body shivered as if struck by lightning. Her eyes flew open. Glowing faintly in the dark, a sound escaped her lips, half gasp, half cry. Her hands gripped the sand, her whole body trembling as the nectar began to flow through her veins. Daniel held her gently, fear and hope colliding inside him. "Easy. It's all right. You're safe," he whispered. But inside he was terrified. Was this healing her? Or was he watching her final struggle? Then, slowly, the trembling eased. Her breathing grew deeper, steadier. Color returned to her glowing skin, faint light spreading, like waves across her body. The cracks around her lips softened, her voice stronger when she whispered one single word. Life. Daniel's throat tightened. He could barely breathe, his eyes stung with relief. He lifted another drop to her lips, and this time, she drank more willingly. Her chest rose and fell with new strength, her eyes clearer now. Tears formed at the corners, glimmering like silver in the starlight. Daniel let out a shaky laugh, half relief, half exhaustion. "You scared me," he said softly, his voice breaking. I thought I lost you." The alien woman blinked, staring at him. For the first time, her eyes were steady, no longer filled only with fear. They carried something else. Trust, gratitude, and something deeper he could not yet name. Her hand lifted. Weakly, she touched his injured arm, her fingers glowing faintly where his blood had soaked the fabric. Daniel winced but didn't pull away. Her voice was faint but clear when she whispered, "You gave me life." Daniel shook his head, smiling sadly. "No, you fought for it, I only helped." But inside, he knew the truth. He had risked everything for her, and somehow, that bond felt unbreakable now. The night grew colder, the wind sharp. Daniel wrapped his scarf tighter around her and then sat back. The stars looked endless, but for the first time, he did not feel completely alone. Beside him, the alien woman breathed steadily, recovering with each passing moment. But Daniel knew this was not the end. If she had been left to die, then someone had wanted her gone. And whoever they were, they might not be far behind. The glowing nectar in his jar was proof enough. Rare, precious, and dangerous. Others might kill for it or for her. The alien woman stirred again, her voice breaking the silence. She said something in her language, words Daniel couldn't fully understand, but one word he caught clearly, spoken softly yet filled with meaning. Family. Daniel froze, his heart catching in his chest. She had called him family. A stranger, a traveler she had just met. And yet, in her weakest moment, that was the word she chose. Daniel swallowed hard, feeling a warmth spread inside him. He nodded slowly, whispering back, "You're not alone anymore." The desert stretched endless around them, silent and cold. But in the small space under, the rocks, something new had begun. Not just survival, not just life, but a bond stronger than the desert itself. Born from a single glowing drop of nectar, and a promise that neither of them would ever face death alone again. The unspoken bond. The desert night grew colder. The stars burned brighter than fire, covering the sky like scattered jewels. Daniel sat close to the alien woman, watching her. Breathe, every rise and fall of her chest felt like a victory. Only hours ago she had been close to death. Now, her glowing skin shone softly again, the nectar of life spreading through her body. But though her strength returned, her eyes still carried shadows, not only from pain but from memories. Daniel could see it whenever she looked away from him. There was something she wanted to say but could not. A silence heavier than the desert itself. Daniel broke that silence first, his voice low. "You're safe now, at least for tonight." The woman turned to him, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight. Her lips trembled as if she wanted to answer, but instead of words, a single tear slid down her cheek. She looked away quickly as if ashamed to show it. Daniel's chest tightened. He wasn't sure if the tear was for the pain she had survived or for something far deeper. He reached out, gently touching her shoulder. "You don't have to speak," he said softly. "Not if it hurts. I'll understand." For a moment her body shook as if holding back sobs, then with a trembling breath she whispered in broken words, "Alone. Left. To die." The sound was cracked, rough, but the meaning was clear enough. Daniel froze, the truth hitting him harder than the desert sun. She hadn't just collapsed in the sand by accident. She had been abandoned. Someone, her own people, had left her to die. Daniel's hands curled into fists, anger boiling in his chest. What kind of people would do that? He muttered bitterly. But she flinched at his anger. Quickly he softened his voice. "Not you. Not your fault." The woman shook her head, struggling to find more words. "Different. Unwanted. Weak," she said, her voice breaking. Each word felt heavy, as if carved into her heart. Daniel finally understood. She had been cast out, not because of what she had done, but because of who she was. A long silence followed, broken only by the desert wind. Daniel stared at the sand, then back at her. He thought of his own life, the years of wandering, the loneliness that had followed him. He knew what it felt like, to be unwanted, though not in the same way. Maybe that was why he couldn't leave her behind. At last, Daniel spoke, his voice low but steady. "You're not weak," he said. "You survived the desert longer than most would. You're stronger than you think." Her eyes widened, tears glimmering again, but this time she didn't look away. Slowly, her hand lifted, trembling. She touched his injured arm, where the creature's claws had torn him. Her glowing fingers brushed the wound. Daniel winced but did not pull back. Her touch carried warmth, a faint energy that seemed to ease the pain. "Why?" she whispered suddenly. The question cut through the night. Her eyes searched his, filled with confusion. "Why, save me? You could leave." Daniel held her gaze, his throat tightening. How could he explain something he barely understood himself? He thought for a long moment before answering. Because no one deserves to die alone, he said finally. And because you trusted me. Even when you had no reason to. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say more. But no words came. Instead, she leaned closer, her forehead resting lightly against his shoulder. Daniel froze, surprised. Then slowly, he relaxed, letting her rest there. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was gentle, almost comforting. For the first time, Daniel realized something had changed. They were no longer strangers bound only by chance. Something unspoken had grown between them. Not friendship yet, not love, but a bond deeper than either had expected. As the night deepened, Daniel stayed awake, watching the horizon. He knew the desert was not empty, and if someone had left her to die, those same people might come searching. But he also knew one thing with absolute certainty. If they came for her again, they would have to go through him first. The alien woman stirred in her sleep, her hand still resting lightly against his arm. Daniel looked at her glowing face, peaceful, for the first time, and he whispered into the night, "You're not alone anymore." The stars above burned silently. The desert wind carried the promise of danger. But under the jagged rocks, two lives had intertwined. Not by choice, not by destiny, but by a bond that no one could see. An unspoken bond stronger than fear, stronger than loneliness, and perhaps strong enough to change both their fates forever. The pursuers. The desert morning came slow and heavy. The sun rose from the horizon like a burning eye. Its first rays painted the dunes with fire. Daniel sat awake, his knife in hand, eyes fixed on the endless sands. He had not slept. Not even. For a moment, the alien woman rested beside him, her breathing stronger now, her glow brighter. But Daniel's heart felt no peace. Something was coming. He could feel it. The night before had given them silence, but silence in the desert never lasted. He had seen lights on the horizon, faint glimmers like moving stars. They were not natural, not the shimmer of heat. They were machines, searching. And Daniel knew they were not here for him. They were here for her. The woman stirred awake. Her silver eyes blinked slowly as she looked at him. "You didn't sleep," she whispered, her voice soft but clear. Daniel shook his head. "Didn't need it," he lied, though exhaustion weighed heavy on his shoulders. She sat up slowly, the scarf slipping from her shoulders. The glow of her skin was stronger now, but her face carried fear. "They come," she whispered, her voice trembling. Her hands gripped the edge of the rock as if she could already hear them. Daniel leaned closer, his voice steady. "Then we'll be ready." She looked at him, shaking her head. "You don't understand. They will not stop." Her words were filled with sorrow. "They left me to die, but now they want me gone forever. If they find me, they will kill you too." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Let them try," he said firmly. His hand brushed the handle of his knife. But inside, he knew a knife alone would not stand against machines and hunters. Still he would not abandon her, not now, not ever. The wind carried the sound first, a low hum, deep and steady. Daniel's eyes narrowed as he scanned the dunes. Far off, shadows moved against the morning light. Dark figures riding across the sand. Sleek crafts. Gliding over the dunes, the hunters had arrived. The alien woman pulled herself close to Daniel, her breath quickened, her body trembling. "No escape," she whispered. But Daniel gripped her hand tightly. "Listen to me," he said, his voice strong. "You are not dying here. Not while I'm alive." The crafts drew nearer, their engines roaring louder. Dust rose behind them like storm clouds. Daniel's heart pounded, but he forced his mind to stay clear. He scanned the rocks, the cliffs, the shadows. If they were going to survive, they needed more than courage, they needed a plan. "Can you walk?" Daniel asked quickly. The woman nodded weakly. "Not fast," she admitted. "Then we'll make them come to us," Daniel decided. He pulled her deeper into the rocks, where shadows hid them from sight. There, He placed the glowing jar of nectar between them. "This is what they want, isn't it?" Daniel asked. Her eyes lowered, shame flickering across her face. "Yes. And me," she whispered. "They fear me, Daniel. They fear what I carry inside." They want it destroyed. Before Daniel could ask more, the hunters' voices echoed across the desert. Sharp, harsh words in a tongue he didn't know, but the meaning was clear. Commands, threats, the language of predators. Shadows moved closer, figures armed and armored. Their glowing visors swept across the rocks. Searching, Daniel's grip on his knife tightened. His heart thundered in his chest, but he forced himself to stay still. The woman leaned close, whispering so softly it was almost lost in the wind. "You don't have to fight for me." Daniel turned sharply, his voice hard. "Yes, I do. Because you're not just someone I found in the sand. You're mine to protect now." Her eyes widened, filled with tears. No words followed, only the touch of her hand against his arm. A silent answer, a silent bond. The hunters spread out, their boots crunching against stone. One of them raised a scanner, its light sweeping across the rocks. Daniel's breath caught as it passed close. Then the beam stopped, locked onto the faint glow of the nectar jar. They shouted in triumph, weapons raised. Daniel cursed under his breath. He grabbed the jar quickly and pulled the woman behind him. The hunters stormed forward, their blades glinting in the sunlight. Daniel stood tall, his knife ready, his body trembling but unyielding. He whispered over his shoulder, "When I move, run. Don't stop. Don't look back." But the woman's voice broke as she whispered back, "I won't leave you." The hunters closed in, their shadows stretching long across the sand. Daniel braced himself. The desert held its breath. The moment had come, and in that moment one truth burned inside him like fire. He would fight no matter the cost, because for the first time in years, he had something worth protecting, a new dawn. The hunters moved like shadows under the rising sun. Their armor gleamed, their weapons glowing with sharp light. Dust swirled around them as they closed in, their voices harsh and commanding. Daniel stood in front of the alien woman, knife in hand, his body tense. He knew he was only one man against many, but in his heart burned a fire stronger than fear. He had something worth protecting now. The alien woman's trembling hand clutched his sleeve, her silver eyes shone with both fear and trust. Daniel glanced at her, and in that single look he made his choice. He would not give her up. He would not let them take her, even if it meant dying here in the desert. The hunters shouted again, their words filled with threats. One stepped forward, visor glowing. He pointed at the woman and then at the jar of nectar. The meaning was clear. Hand them over or die. Daniel's chest rose with a deep breath. He tightened his grip on the jar, then lifted it high. The hunters froze, their weapons raised. Daniel's voice rang across the sand, steady and fierce. "You want this? You'll have to go through me." The woman gasped. She could see the hunters readying their weapons. "Daniel, no," she whispered. But Daniel only glanced at her, his eyes calm. "You gave me a reason to fight," he said, "and I won't stop now." The first hunter charged. Blade flashing, Daniel dodged, swinging his knife. Metal clashed against steel, sparks flew in the morning light. The hunter staggered back, but another rushed forward. Daniel fought like a cornered wolf, every strike filled with desperation, every movement fueled by her trust. The woman watched, her heart pounding. Fear gripped her, but something inside her stirred. The nectar in her veins had given her strength. And now, as she looked at Daniel bleeding and fighting for her, she realized she could not stay silent. Not anymore. Her hands glowed faintly, light spreading from her skin. She whispered words in her language, ancient and powerful. The glow grew, brighter, spilling across the rocks like silver fire. The hunters stopped, hesitating. Their visors flickered with confusion, their steps faltering. Daniel turned, shocked. The woman was standing, her body trembling but strong. Her glow spread brighter with every heartbeat. The hunters hissed in anger, shouting commands, but their fear was clear. They had not expected her to rise. One hunter lifted his weapon, firing a bolt of searing energy. Daniel lunged forward, ready to shield her, but the glow around her flared. The bolt struck the air before her and dissolved into light. The hunters froze, their weapons suddenly useless. The woman's voice grew louder, echoing in the desert. Her glow pushed outward, a wave of silver energy. The hunters stumbled back, shielding their eyes. Their machines screeched, engines failing. As the wave of light passed over them, dust rose in chaos as their crafts fell silent. One by one, the hunters dropped their weapons and fled, their shouts fading into the horizon. Silence fell, broken only by Daniel's ragged breaths. He dropped to his knees, knife slipping from his hand. His arm bled, his body exhausted, but his eyes never left her. The alien woman stood shining in the dawn light, her glow softening as her strength faded. Then she collapsed forward, into his arms. Daniel caught her, holding her close. Her head rested against his chest, her breath weak but steady. He whispered, voice shaking, "You did it. You saved us." Her lips moved faintly, her voice almost too soft to hear. "Not us. You gave me life. I only returned it." Daniel smiled, though his eyes stung with tears. "You're stronger than you know," he whispered. The sun rose higher, painting the desert gold. The hunters were gone, their machines silent. The two of them sat in the sand, broken but alive. For the first time, Daniel felt hope rising with the dawn. The woman stirred, lifting her hand weakly to touch his cheek. Her silver eyes met his, no longer filled with fear. "Family," she whispered, her voice soft but steady. Daniel froze, the word piercing his heart. He swallowed hard, then nodded. "Yes," he said firmly. Family. The desert stretched, endless before them. Danger still lurked in its shadows, but together they were no longer alone. Together they had faced death and found something stronger. A bond that needed no words. A bond born from trust, sacrifice, and the first drop of nectar. As the new dawn lit the sky, Daniel stood lifting her gently in his arms. He looked at the horizon. There was still a long road ahead, but he no longer feared it because in that endless desert, he had found what he never thought he would. Not just survival, not just hope, but a family. And as the wind carried their shadows across the golden sand, a new story had begun. One that would not end in fear, but in the promise of life and in the strength of a bond that no desert, no hunters, and no darkness could ever break.